Isn't that what we've been talking about? In his hands he holds his people, whether it's back in the days of John to the 7 literal churches of Revelation, whether it's through the ages of history from John's day up until our day, God still holds them in his hand. If it's in our day, in our personal life or in our church corporate life, God still holds us in his hand. And you remember Revelation 1, 2, and 3 helps us to see that there is a characteristic of Christ, a characteristic of the Son of God, which identifies with each of us at a particular time in our experience. If there is some particular need we have, some particular challenge we have, there is a characteristic of Jesus that meets that need. He is all-sufficient. One of the things I enjoy about the beautiful letter of Ephesians that was written by the Apostle Paul, the church of Ephesus, the first of those 7 churches that was mentioned. When you read in that book, you'll see the all-sufficiency of Christ. I recommend it to you, especially the first chapter or 2 of Ephesians. Today, we're looking at the church, the 6th of the 7 churches, the one called Philadelphia. Now, almost everybody knows the meaning of the name Philadelphia, so help me out. Yes, the city of brotherly love, that's right. Why would it have such a name? Well, Attalus II founded the city of Philadelphia out there kind of in the regions. Some settlers from Pergamus actually seem to have come over to the area that became Philadelphia, and they settled this kind of outpost area. They were kind of tasked with a certain missionary task as a community. They were to try to help to spread the Greek culture throughout 3 little provinces of that area. And actually they were quite successful, for it wasn't too many years until Greek kind of became the major language of the area. Attalus II, who really established the city, was known so much for his commitment and his care for his brother Eumenes II that he received the nickname Philadelphus, and thus they named the city after him. Now, during the early part of the 1st century AD, there was a series of earthquakes in Philadelphia and the surrounds. And Sardis and Philadelphia were extremely affected by the one that happened in 17 AD, so much so that there were aftershocks carrying on for several years after the major earthquake of 17 AD. And many of the people of Philadelphia actually lived in tents and outside for a long while because they were so worried about being enclosed within the city or within a building. In fact, it's stated that after that happened, there was only 1 pillar left standing in Philadelphia. As we read some of the things of the message to Philadelphia, we'll see that it was actually quite tailored to the experience of the people of that day. You know, there was a need to have the city rebuilt after those earthquakes, of course. And so there was a rebuilding of that city. And because that city was rebuilt by Emperor Tiberius, Caesar Tiberius, it was then renamed from Philadelphia to Neo-Caesarea. Then later on, it had its name changed again under the time of Flavius Vespasian to Flavia, his family name. So it's kind of interesting to note there were some name changes of the literal town that kind of went along with the history of the period and who was being influential at the time. I want you to keep that in mind because it's an interesting way that Christ comes and talks to the church of Philadelphia. Remember, we talked about when we look at these messages to the 7 churches that there are at least 3 major applications we need to recognize. One is that the message did apply to the people of Philadelphia at the time of John. It wouldn't make sense to keep the letter if it didn't apply to them. So it did apply, and it made sense, and it ministered to their needs. But as we've already talked about, as we look at the characteristics of God's church, the Christian movement, from the time of John until the time Jesus comes again, we can see at different periods of history in the same progression the kind of general characteristics that we see as we go around to the 7 churches and read their letters. And remember, last time we were together, we looked at the time of Thyatira. Remember? That time when the Dark Ages were in effect. And remember when Christ came and identified himself as the one who had eyes like a flame of fire, who could dispel the darkness, not only could see but could illuminate. And so we see that Christ meets the church's needs throughout history as well. Before we get into the historical section, though, I want to talk a little bit more about literal Philadelphia. And I was reading a book by Roy Naden, and I came across his first experience with the city of Philadelphia as he went there to visit. And I just wanted to read you this little story that happened in his life. This happened as he was going to the present day area where Philadelphia would be. He said, nearing the city, I exclaimed to the driver of our car, "See those men and women carrying baskets of grapes on their heads? That's a perfect picture." Now, you have to understand, see, the area around Philadelphia is much like Napa Valley. Very fertile, lots of grapes. There's a volcanoous mountain there that has spread ash all over the area, and the remnants of that volcano has caused a very good area for grapes to be grown. So he stops to get the picture, right? Do you see people stopping around Napa Valley, getting their tripod and their camera out, and they're taking all these pictures? You notice that? I don't think I've ever lived in an area where I've seen more photographers out doing their work than in Napa Valley. Well, this was the way it was for Brother Naden. He wanted to get a picture of these harvesters harvesting the grapes, carrying the baskets on their heads. And the driver pulled to a stop, excuse me, and we set up the camera. But we needed to get closer to the action, so we moved the equipment closer to the vines. Just about the time we finished the shot, I noticed a tractor headed at full speed in our direction. We quickly put the equipment away, suspecting we had unwittingly trespassed on private property. I mused silently that at least we had captured the scene before being turned away. The owner, driving the tractor, could speak little English, but that did not seem to be much of a hindrance. He had come merely to offer his help, the use of the tractor or anything else, and he gave us some of the fruit just picked from the vines. We went away with about 10 pounds of the most delicious grapes. This was our first introduction to the city of Philadelphia. Brotherly love. I thought that was a neat little experience that he had as he was trying to seek out the ruins in the area where Philadelphia once was. Philadelphia is a pleasure to talk about as a church. Remember, I mentioned early on that out of the 7 churches, there are only 2 churches that are listed that received no rebuke from God in the message. The second church of Smyrna and the 6th or next to the last church of Philadelphia. By the way, that fits into the chiastic structure of these messages, but we won't get into all that little detail today. So we have no rebuke given to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a delightful time. Now remember, leading up to the time period of Philadelphia, when we begin to apply the historical application of the Christian church, remember we came out of the Dark Ages time of Thyatira, and then the time that should have been a really exciting time, the time of the Reformation, pictured by Sardis. But as we read the message to Sardis, we see that the time of the Reformation didn't do all God had hoped it would do. And part of the problem, as we study historically, was that as Protestants began to come out of what they thought was falsehood, then they began to institute their own coercive measures upon those that wouldn't follow their way. And so we find that that time that should have been so delightful did not quite do all that God, I'm sure, had hoped it would do. And he had known that when he wrote the message to the church of Sardis. And so that fit the historical situation. So that took us up through the 15th, 16th centuries of our present time. How does the message to the church of Philadelphia fit now? What happened following that time period? Let's refresh our memory by reading the message once again. I know Joel read it to you, but in this context now, and with this in your mind, I want to read the message in its fullness. Revelation 3, verses 7 through 13. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia, write, these are the words of him who is holy and true. Let's stop there a minute. What would you do if you met somebody who was holy and true, through and through? Somebody who was totally honest. Somebody who was like Nathaniel, an Israelite in whom there was no guile. Remember? Somebody, though, that went beyond Nathaniel and was like the one that Nathaniel came to see, Jesus Christ himself. What kind of a person would be truly holy and righteous in our time? Would you recognize that person? Would I recognize that person? Do you think we would consider them normal? Do you think we would consider them fanatical? Would they dress like us? Would they eat like us? Would they do business dealings like we do? I think it's good for us to think about that sometimes. How closely can we identify with someone who is truly holy? The one who is writing this are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. Let's see what that key, what that has to do with anything. It says, what he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength. After coming through the dark ages and after having dealt with that whole period of turmoil after the dark ages, when they were trying to sort out all the biblical truths, figure out which was right and which was not right, and there were so many with different voices, you can see how people might still have just a little strength. Yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews though they are not, but are liars, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. Since you've kept my command to endure patiently. Do you think it's important for us to endure when it seems hard? To be patient when it seems like God is not hurrying at all, like he's taking his time? What about those who endure patiently? I will also keep you from the hour of trial, that hour mentioned in Daniel 12, verse 1, that will test the whole world right before Christ comes. I will keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come upon the whole world to test those who live on the earth. Wow, what a promise. Then he says, I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. Him who overcomes, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will he leave it. I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, and the new Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God, and I will also write on him my new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Notice the people of Philadelphia exhibit brotherly love by keeping the word that God gives them. And when they keep that word, he promises that he will not forsake them, but he will keep them through whatever is coming on this earth, but particularly that hour of trial that's expected upon the whole earth. And he says, since you have not denied my name. You remember what Christ said about denying his name? What's the opposite of denying Christ's name? What? I saw it. I saw you mouth it. Confessing his name. That's correct. The opposite of denying Christ's name would be to confess his name, to share his name, to proclaim his name to the world. Philadelphia is a missionary church. Just like the literal city, when it was established, was a missionary for Greece, the Philadelphian church in the Christian era will be the church to take the gospel, at least begin to take the gospel to the world. And what happens during the time that we would naturally expect it to be Philadelphia, for we already talked about Thyatira and Sardis, and so we know the historical period must begin somewhere in the 18th century. 18th, 19th century. And those of you, we've talked about Bible prophecy before, remember this is the time right at the end of the rule of the little horn power and the great oppression against those who truly want to follow God's way. Remember that time prophecy that ended in 1798? So we would expect then, right towards the end of that, something fantastic to begin to happen. And did it happen in history? Oh, yes. In fact, when we study, there was a worldwide missionary movement. Worldwide. It transcended denominational lines to quite a degree. There were great Bible societies set up. Missionaries sent out. William Carey was the first that's usually considered the first one sent out by this great impetus of missionary, this missionary strength of the church. William Carey decided he was a shoemaker and a lay Baptist preacher. But under conviction of God, he went to that dark area of India that didn't know about the gospel of Christ. Now, as he went to India, he spent 6 years trying to get the Indians to accept Jesus. In the process, his wife died. He was left with 6 children to care for. And after 6 years under that kind of trying circumstance, one person of India accepted Jesus Christ as their Savior. Yet, that was kind of the impetus, that was the beginning of great missionary activity around the globe. I wanted to read just a little bit about what happened here. I brought one of my favorite historians who just passed away a few years ago, one of my teachers, Mervyn Maxwell. I have 2 Mervyns in my life that had a big influence. One was a Maxwell and one was a Harding. It says that, let's see, I better go down a little bit. In 1785, there existed only 20 mission stations in the whole world, to the best that we can figure at the time. That was in 1785. More than half of those were established by a little small group called the Moravians. So out of all the others besides the Moravians, you can see then that there were less than 10 mission stations. That was before William Carey sailed from England to India in 1793. Before he did that, he helped to establish the Baptist Missionary Society, and then 3 years later, the Interdenominational Baptist Missionary Society was started. The London Missionary Society, was organized. And after 2 years more, a third missionary society in Holland, and then one in Berlin. And then in 1810, the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missionaries. In 1804, the British and Foreign Bible Society, followed by numerous other Bible societies in Europe and America. He states this: overseas missions by no means exhausted the energies of the awakened Philadelphians. Religion is a commodity of which the more we export, the more we have remaining, observed an American Christian in the early 1800s. A new interest was taken in the children. That was the time when the Sunday school movement was established. There was a tremendous awakening. And it, of course, carried on into the mid-19th century with the beginning of the 19th century and the mid-19th century with the great Advent movement and awakening that was here in the United States and around the world. And I wanted to read just a little bit, too, about what I found. An author, Jacques Ducan, mentioned this in his book. He said, interestingly, at the same time, the same fever also gripped Jews and Muslims. In Judaism, the rebirth of European Jewry through the Hasidim included a prediction of the Messiah's coming for the year 5603, which we would better recognize as the year 1843, 1844. The Baha'i Muslims reached a similar conclusion. The door, opening to the hidden Imam, would appear in the year 1260 of the Hegira. That is, better known to us as the year 1843, 1844. And in the secular world, the birth of Marxism with its hopes and optimism, expectation of a new world order. A lot was happening during the mid-19th century. You can see then that the time period of the Philadelphian church was rich with mission impetus, getting the gospel to the world. You can see then why God is pretty happy about the Philadelphian condition. We'll talk about the Laodicean condition next week. But what's the third application? What's the third application? Besides the original city of Philadelphia, the historical period of the Christian church that exhibited such fervor for Christ and trying to take the message to the world. What's the third application? I think it teaches us that for every one of us who have accepted Jesus Christ as our Savior, there is a mission. That God expects us to share, to confess His name before others. Not to deny His name, but openly confess His name before those that are around us. That's for each individual Christian. That's for each Christian group we call church. And so, if we would like to be among those that receive no rebuke, if we would like to be among those who have a name of the city of God written upon us, that means we are citizens of that great city. If we would like to have God's name written upon us as is promised, that means we reflect His character. The way He deals with us, we deal with each other. If we would like to have that new name written upon us that's promised there, 3 promises of something being written on us. If we would like to have a new experience, totally new and complete and vigorous in Christ, then we need to be among those who have kept His word and not denied His name. Oh, if we have an ear, we need to hear what the Spirit says to this church. He says, I will keep you from that hour of trial as well. There may come a time when things are really hard. But if you've confessed my name, if you've followed the way I've pointed out to you, if you've been faithful in my service, if you've accepted my mission for your life, I will keep you. You have kept my way, I will keep you. No matter what happens, even the trial that's going to come on the whole world, I will keep you from that. And I will be with you through that. And I'm coming soon, he says. Hold on to what you have, so that no one will take your crown. Him who overcomes, I will make a pillar. There may only be one pillar standing there in Philadelphia, but I will make you a pillar that stands forever in the temple of God. Never again will you leave that temple. I will write on him, on you, the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on you my new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Because what he says to the churches, he says to you, and he says to me.